So when I was talking about turnarounds, I had a couple colleagues read my June paper. They said, Don, you mentioned turnarounds, but quite frankly, though everybody has heard the term, not a lot of people really understand what's involved, and very few people have actually done it. Turnarounds are not easy. You got to have the right background and the right mentality to do it. But the way I view a turnaround is really in 4 stages. The first one is the triage. And what I'm doing right there is determining quickly, is this a go or no go? I've got to quickly assess the company, its resources, its products, its financial statements. I also need to take a look at the marketplace. I've seen consultants and executives come into companies and try to fix them when they should have never started fixing in the first place, because the marketplace is a bad place to make money. And but in this one, you're focused at stopping the bleeding if it's a go, and you're starting to develop a vision for the company. I'll explain why that's important in a second. But that first phase is the triage phase. The second one is you need to stabilize the company. I had the golden opportunity to live next door to Alan Carlson in Detroit, Michigan for a number of years. Alan was the chief quality architect at Ford Motor Company, and later on became the chief quality architect at Chrysler, hired personally by Iacocca to improve the quality of Chrysler cars. And one of the things I learned from him and learned from some of the Japanese, really the who's who of Japanese quality that would come and stay at his house for the weekend. I'd go out on a Saturday and have a cup of coffee, is no matter how badly you do something, at least do it consistently badly. If it's chaos and it's different every time, then you can't fix it. You've got to do something consistently before you can start fixing the process. So you need to stabilize the company. This is also, as a CEO, when I typically do my mea culpa, mea maxima, mea culpa speech to all the customers, is I have to go around to all the customers that are upset at the company, either because they haven't delivered, poor quality, or whatever, listen to them yell and scream at me, and then say, okay, look, I hear you. We were wrong. There's a new sheriff in town. Let me tell you what we're going to do. And you got to be able to look them in the eyes and get them to believe you that you are going to take this distressed, broken company and you're going to provide them a much better service or solution or product in the future. And the last part of the stability is using that vision which you started to develop to really start communicating to your A players. In a distressed company, your A players have already got the resumes on the street because they're the most mobile. You've got to give them a reason for staying. You've got to paint a picture into the future that they will buy into, and they've got to start looking at you and trusting you and believing in you. And that's part of the stabilization process. As we move to the third one, now we look at cash generation, trying to get profitability. And this is what we're doing is you're looking at all kinds of ways to reduce the burn rate. This is not a cookbook. This is unique for every company. But this can include things like product line rationalization. It's cutting down the number of products you're selling because you're not making money on some of your products, or some of your large products are taking way too much of your working capital over a long period of time, and you need that working capital to support the rest of the business. You can do customer attractiveness prioritization, where you take a look at your various customers. And there's some customers you probably should not be selling to because you're not making money on a consistent basis with them. You can take the customer service organization from an expense center to a revenue center by getting them to start selling proactive services. There's all kinds of things you can do to reduce the burn rate and improve the profitability of the company. But the bottom line is you got to start generating cash as quickly as possible. And then finally, once you've done that, then you grow the company. And there's several ways to grow the company. I'd like to take a moment about this. Most people have seen this very simple matrix. This is called the Ansoff Growth Matrix, developed by Igor Ansoff, who was a Russian mathematician of the 20th century and is known as the father of strategic management. But it's very simple. 4 quadrants: existing products, new products, existing markets, and new markets. And this is, as simple as this matrix is, it has a lot of power to it, particularly for anybody going in and working with their clients in terms of how to grow the company. I have spent entire days with organizations on just one quadrant. But obviously the bulk of your focus, the bulk of your business is coming from your existing product to your existing market, your existing customers. But as you look to grow the company, ask yourself, is there new products either through development or acquisition or partnership that I can sell to my existing customers? Because the easiest sell in the world is to sell more stuff to an existing customer, because that way you avoid the customer acquisition costs, which is high in most cases. Bottom left-hand corner is market development. Can I take my existing products to other markets, either tangential markets, upstream or downstream, other geographies? Can I modify them so they give me a broader market availability? And then finally, to the bottom right-hand corner is diversification. Is there any new products that I can develop with my core capabilities in either engineering, software development, product design, to markets that I understand, I have access to those channels either through direct or indirect partnerships, and offer brand new products to brand new markets. Now, what we've typically used this matrix for also is for doing capital acquisition and capital planning. So in the capital planning process, we would look at 3 to 5 year investments and say, how much money are we going to put in each quadrant? And some companies may not put anything in that bottom right-hand quadrant, but they definitely should be putting money in either the upper right or the lower left to help grow the company. Because the only way to improve the number in the top left is through taking market share from your competitors. That's absolutely doable, but it's not the easiest thing to do, and you want to diversify yourself. So that simple little matrix, I think, has a lot of power to it. And I just want to make sure you mention it as I go into companies and they say, how are you going to grow it? This is where I start from.
And Don, let me ask you a quick question. This is Mark Fonseca. Sure. On those quadrants, you go back a slide, product development, new markets, diversification. How much of that do you find out from your existing customers, what they want moving forward?
Depends on the nature of the business, Mark. Great question. So if you don't mind, I will go off on my standard 90-second soapbox on high-tech marketing versus traditional marketing. You do find some stuff from the customers, but the problem is with technology-based markets, and a lot of organizations are becoming technology-based markets, the customer does not understand the technology well enough to even know what to ask for. The best example I can give is, I'm going to date myself. So go back to the late 70s, and everybody's carrying around these big boom boxes on their shoulders. Remember that? Am I the only one? Well, if you were a traditional marketeer and you looked at that, you would ask these people what they wanted. And they'd say, well, you know, I'd like a rubber cushion because it's heavy. I want to be able to put 12D batteries rather than 6D batteries because I wanted to play all day long at the beach. But that's what they asked for. It's like if you were a traditional marketeer and you're looking at households' breakfast patterns, 92 million households in America, 17 million of them have 5 people in the house. Of the 17 million, 11 million of them all like toast in the morning, but toasters only come with 4 slots normally. As a traditional marketer, I would go out and ask the customers, say, would you like to have a 5-slot toaster? And I come back and say, yeah, you know, I had 4 million customers come back and say they'd like one. I put together a business case, I present it to my company, we make a 5-slot toaster. But in the technology space, they don't know what to ask for. So back in the 70s, if you take a look at Sony, which had a core competency, electronic miniaturization, they were the best in the world. They looked at the major trend. Now, I can give you all kinds of gobbledygook words on strategy from McKinsey and my time at Booz Allen and all that. But the fact is, the essence of strategy is to be able to look over the horizon and identify macro trends you're willing to invest in. That's what strategy is. And so Sony looked at the macro trends. You know what? People are listening to music more and more and more in a mobile fashion. What can we do with the voodoo we do to change what they do? Nobody hired a fancy Booz Allen consultant to go out and ask customers what they wanted. Sony fundamentally said, the trend is listening to music more in a mobile fashion. Nobody knew it was possible to take that big boom box on my shoulder and put it into something on my belt with the headphones in it and listen to music. The Sony Walkman was a direct result of that type of high-tech marketing versus traditional marketing, where you did not ask the customer what they wanted. What you did is you understood the macro trend within the customer's world and how you could make their world fundamentally different with the voodoo you did. And so back to your question, Mark, great question. You get information from your existing customers, but part of the value and the art of strategy is to look at the marketplace and take a step back and ask yourself, how can you fundamentally change what people are doing with the voodoo you do? Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
You did. Excellent. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. So restoration is a much broader focus. I view it as restructuring with a marketplace challenge. And there's several different drivers. Well, clearly the environment, everybody's distressed. The personnel, you've got people that your A players are, and again, I'm always focusing at the A players. I figure if I take care of the A players, everybody else will be taken care of too. And in my hiring policies, I would rather hire 5 A players and pay them exceedingly well than 10 B players or 20 C players. But I'm focusing at the personnel, what to do. Liquidity is also an issue. And then we come to the emotional intangibles. So we're looking at this marketplace where, quite frankly, this is a very stressful world. People's lives are being changed, and most times not for the best. Of course, I remember Shiravita, the 8th century Indian philosopher, who once said that if a problem is solvable, don't worry. If the problem is not solvable, why worry? It's not going to do any good. So quickly determine whether you think you can solve your company and your marketplace, and if you can, focus on it. Now, on the emotional intangibles, when I tell my wife, I mean, I have walked into companies as CEO where the week before they had a fist fight in the staff meetings. I've walked in some weird situations, and she can't believe it. But I said, honey, this is kind of what they pay me to do, to go into these situations. But my standard employee presentation that I would be willing to share with Jim if anybody's ever interested. But I have a standard introduction myself, and I tell people that, look, you're not going to hear me yell. You're not going to hear me swear. I'm very intense. I'm passionate. But I don't get rattled. I've just learned over a lot of years of doing this that if I stay calm and follow a process and think about things correctly, then we have a much better chance of surviving and doing a better job. With that being said, I'll also mention one other philosophy I have in life, which I think has stood me well. I believe that good decision-making is all about thought process. And it's not the answers, it's the questions. It's how you're thinking about the problem. So I have both a professional and a personal perspective on life that if I'm struggling with something and I really can't come up with an answer, or the answer's convoluted or too detailed or it takes 20 pages to explain it, I've learned to call time out in my own mind, take a step back and say, how am I thinking about the problem? Once I write out the formula, I can get 100 people to put the numbers in the formula. It's figuring out the formula, either on a professional or personal basis. So one of the things that I do when I walk into a company, the first thing I do is I work with my direct reports in terms of how to think about problems. And when I hire people, I tend to hire bright people versus smart people. If I get both, that's great. Smart people know a lot about something. Bright people just know how to think. I tell people, and this is a self-service comment, I apologize ahead of time, but I know nothing about making baby diapers. But you put me in a company that makes baby diapers, I will figure out how to make it better because I know how to think and how to ask the right questions. So the emotional intangibles associated with restructuring are really, really important. And this is where we've got to put a lot of our attention to. So how can we approach this? Well, I'm suggesting the 5 C's. I put this as cash, customers, culture, community, and commerce. I started them all with C, so I had a certain poetic integrity to them. But let's take a look at each one of these for a moment. Well, cash is a no-brainer. If you've got no cash, you've got nothing to store. But it's very important to determine your cash runway and do it from both a conservative standpoint as well as a pessimistic standpoint and optimistic standpoint. If there's not enough runway, obviously you've got some hard decisions to make. And, you know, downsizing is one of the most hated parts of my job. I do not like to fire people. I come from a blue-collar family, and it's typically the people that are getting paid the least that suffer the most. The executives all got packages. So I take downsizing very seriously. I almost always make sure I take a blend from across the organizational ladder, both at the top level and at the bottom level. There's a lot of liquidity options you can do in terms of your company. I mentioned some before in terms of dropping products you're not making money with.